Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back in with Ronnie Feldman for another episode of Creativity and Compliance. Welcome back, Ronnie.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good. You recently attended the SCCE CEI in Dallas, and at that event, there was a keynote by Department of Justice Representative Nicole Argent about an update to the evaluation of corporate compliance programs. A very long-winded introduction. But there's some key parts, Ronnie, around training and communication that I wanted to maybe explore with you. Other people have focused on AI or data analytics and a lot of different things. But I'm just going to read from the update to the 2024 ECCP, and it's found in, we're going to link to that document in the show notes, but it's found on page 6 under the area of form content effectiveness of training. So the first new point is, quote, are the company's training and communications tailored to the particular needs, interests, and values of relevant employees? How would you interpret that, or maybe how would you help a compliance professional think through that from your perspective?
Yeah, there's tailored and relevant, and they also touch on values. And I'll remind everybody that even in the previous memo, they talk about separating training from communications, right? That these are two relevant things. That there's a value in communicating more regularly, and there's a value of effective training. I love that they're putting more focus on this. Let's remember that in some ways it's the tail wagging the dog. Like they want programs to be effective, and they're giving you a wide berth in how you do that. So we shouldn't be looking for them to figure out like the best ways to do that. But what they are saying is it has to be tailored and relevant. To me, this means human. We're not pushing legal policies. If we want to be effective, we need to be relevant to them, which means to talk to them like human beings, to give them information that is relevant to their jobs, and to not waste their time. The more that we push content that feels irrelevant or preachy or boring, feels irrelevant to them, and we know that's not effective. We know it. In our bones, we know it. Every piece of data that's out there that says that no matter how you learn, nobody learns from being bored. So what I take away from this is we have to find shorter content that is more targeted, because if you have just one big monolith of your training or one big communication that goes out to everybody, it'll engage some people but not others. So I get that there's a challenge in that, in the sense that it takes effort to be more targeted. But that's why there's benefit in shorter, more frequent communications and microlearning, because you can try more things to find out what is more effective, and be more targeted with that. And it has the benefit of engaging people through variety and surprise by trying lots of little things. Quite frankly, it's why like companies like ours have a variety of different approaches, because we know that not everybody likes the same things. We think that it's better to try lots and lots of little things, knowing that some is going to engage some and some is not going to engage others, but you'll get more people over time. I want to talk about there's something in there that's about measurement too, right?
Yeah, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
But let me focus on the values part. This is the first time we've heard the DOJ talk about training and communication around values. How would you help a compliance professional think about putting some media forward to help either celebrate the company's values or communicate the company's values, Ronnie?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. When most companies do promote the values, it comes off, I don't know, at best it's aspirational, right? These are our values, but most people don't really pay attention to that. They're like, whatever, we do good in the world. There's a lot of cynics or skeptics in your company who that's in every company, by the way. There's a lot of cynics and skeptics who are like, yeah. And if it's presented in a way that feels false or preachy, then it does a disservice. Again, there's value in presenting these things in a ways that are more human, and also in a way that speaks intelligently to your audience. What I mean by that is you can call out when you're promoting these things. We know everybody thinks they have integrity, but it's important to work at it every day. It's not something you have and you don't have. It's something we have to work at every day by every choice that you make. or point out that you're moving away from rules-based to principles-based was kind of a general thing that most companies are doing. So we're saying, look, there's a lot of rules, but you're going to have to make your own decisions. You are accountable, and we are here to help you. So that's a way to reorient your program around we are advisors and coaches, not people who are pushing rules at you. I love the idea of a lot of times we have like leadership who does the talking head video, it's like integrity is very important to us. Our values mean da da da, and most people just tune that out. So finding a more interesting way to present your leaders. So I always find that dialogues beat monologues. So interviewing people is a more effective way to get that information out. Hey, tell me a little bit more about our values. I understand that we have an acronym for that, which is blah, 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 blah. And so tell me about the first principle of integrity. And then they could talk a little bit. You go, oh, that's interesting because most people think we have integrity. So the dialogue about that makes that a more interesting presentation. So that's another way to get your values out. Point being, we're less about rules. We're more about this is the kind of company that we are, presenting that in a way that's empathetic and thoughtful of the audience and their time, and doing that in an interesting way is more effective.
Ronnie, there's a second new question that I'm going to read to you. It reads, quote, has the training addressed lessons learned from compliance issues faced by other companies operating in the same industry or geographic region? I know a lot of your training is bespoke to a company. You interview, you work with the compliance team to come up with a story. But here we have the DOJ saying you can bring in outside sources. And one of the most effective communications, I won't say it was training I ever heard of, was the following. We all remember the Volkswagen emission testing scandal back in 2015. A friend of mine was the chief compliance officer at the electric company in Houston. And she got a call from the CEO and he said, I want to do a communication about the Volkswagen emission testing scandal and how that would never happen at the electric company. Because he saw directly that the failures of values at Volkswagen led to the criminal scandal. And he wanted to use that as an example for communication. And I recognize that's outside the geographic region of the Houston Electric Company. It's outside even the industry. But how would you help a compliance professional think through using outside events to create a story about the company's values or compliance program?
Yeah, it's one of the best ways to take it's one of the best ways to learn because what do people like? Ripped from the headlines. Look at television shows. What is the Law and Order are always like? Ripped from the headlines. So using it's effective for a couple reasons. What you're saying and what they're suggesting. Most people, we all have friends. I have a lot of friends who don't know like the way we apply our entertaining stuff. They don't know that I'm working in the compliance field, and they're always like that stuff happens. People don't understand that fraud, corruption, bribery. They see it on the news, but they don't think it happens in their backyard or in their company. I feel like they just are like, really? Do people really do that stuff? One of the reasons that people don't engage in compliance training is it doesn't feel real to them. It feels like something made up. So showing them that this actually happens from good people who are misinformed or pressures put on them, like it could happen to you. Showing them relevant examples ripped from the headlines is a great way to make a teachable moment. People love that stuff. It's full of drama. Back when I first got into this area, I worked for a top 5 company in the world. They would have us make one video that they would play to their top 1,000 leaders in the company. And it was a 5-minute video called the Rogues Gallery. And we would literally take news stories of all the people who screwed up in the year, fraud, corruption, bribery, set it to music, some theme like breaking the law. We find some kind of like musical way to tie it all together. But it was mostly like kind of a bit of a scare tactic, or like it takes 1,000 years to build a reputation. It takes 100 years to build a reputation and a day to tear it down. But we try to not make it scary. We try to show them these things and then have it presented in an entertaining way. So it wasn't like blood runs red in the highway driver's ed video that it's sometimes when you do things that are too scary, then people bury their problems. So you want to present the information in a more entertaining way. We have a series, if you're weirded out about showing real stories, we have a series called Tales from the Hotline, which is essentially real stories that we took and then anonymized them to present it in a more entertaining way. Yes, use real stories. It doesn't even I remember like when Phil Mickelson a few years back, like he was out of a tournament, he was putting and he missed the putt and he just stopped the ball before it rolled away, like a clear problem with golf etiquette, like the ball was rolling and he just picked it up. And they were like, "What are you doing?" And then I had a compliance officer say that they use that story to talk about ethics. So even if it's not like the VW scandal or what happened at Wells Fargo or what's going on at Boeing, you can take anything from your life. You're at your kid's soccer tournament and there's a parent who's yelling and screaming or inappropriately. There's lots of ways to talk about these issues that makes it more real to people.
Ronnie, there it was a lot of talk in this update about the DOJ focused on data access and data analytics. And they also brought that to training. But I wanted to set this question up to really ask you, is there another way to think about engagement? Let me just read the question. Has the company evaluated the employee's engagement with the training session and whether they have learned the covered subject matter? Obviously, you can take a test and you can get scored on the test, but there's also, in addition to the quantitative, the qualitative. How would you help a compliance officer think through whether a employee audience has been engaged from a qualitative perspective? I guess if you were standing up in front of an audience, you might think about laughter, you might think about applause, you might think about cat calls, you might think about a wide variety of things you may have experienced in your professional career or your previous professional career. How would you help a compliance professional think about engagement from a qualitative analysis?
Yeah, my head goes in a couple of different directions on this. So I guess this probably won't be new to the audience, but I might ramble around a little bit. So bring me back if I go too far afield. My first thought is let's just acknowledge the fact that when you give them the training, whether it's good or bad, and then give them the questions right afterwards, that they're not really learning anything. It's not. It is measure. It's measurement for the sake of measurement, right? You've given them the training. They're more than likely doing their laundry or checking their email or making a sandwich while they're clicking and through this thing. And then they get a couple chances to get it right, or they call their buddies and they go, "Hey, I want to get this right. What was the answer?" Right? So when you do the training and then give them the question right afterwards, which is what most companies do, that is measuring their knowledge, but we know that has nothing to do with learning and behavior. So when you talk about qualitative, my first instinct is really what should we be measuring as an organization? A sense of organizational justice and would I speak up are two questions that come to mind. Really, you want to say, do we believe this company is in service of doing good in the world? If something bad happens, would you do the right thing and speak up about it? Or do you trust the speak up resources? Do you trust that there's a sense of organizational justice in the company? Those are questions that I would ask, and I would ask those things a couple times throughout the year, separate from training. Or even if it's like a training about corruption and bribery, that quiz, you got to do that quiz later, right? Not to see if they've actually retained the information. And we will likely learn some things that they have not retained the information. I think that the quality of as you say, with the hooting, the hollering, and the laughing, that's all good. It's hard to measure that. So I think we all intuitively know when things are good. You can measure things like, was the training good or not, or did I enjoy it or not? Certainly. But really, just knowing the thing that always drives me crazy is that many companies focus on the measurement part of it. They're going to look at that and they go, "Oh, we got to measure this." And the easiest way to measure it is to just put out something that's simple and boring and then track that 100% completed it. Let's just recognize that we know that has nothing to do with behavior and learning. So if we really want to talk about effective programs, we got to make the learning good, more frequent, and separate the measurement from the quiz. And then you'll really find out if people are learning anything. And then guess what? That'll help you make the training better and more effective, more interesting, because we know that being interesting and playful and positive and engaging will make people remember it more. I don't know. What do you think about all that?
No, I think those are all great points. And what this series of questions has driven home to me, Ronnie, is that the DOJ itself is evolving, and they are listening to people like you, people like me, compliance professionals, and seeing that the rote lawyer training that we started with 20 years ago is not effective. And the audiences, in the form of corporate employees who are receiving the training and communication, have spoken, and they have said, we want more engaging training. And they're saying to us, Mr. and Ms. Compliance Professional, you need to give that to them. You need to figure out a way to demonstrate effectiveness and engagement, and you need to have ways that you can communicate that back to us. So when the regulators evolve, hopefully the people that you and I work with will also evolve, and that we'll all sort of move forward in this area together. And I don't want to say the DOJ is caught up to you, but they're getting close.
Let's just say, like, the more progressive companies are, to me, it's, let's think about the goal of what we're trying to do. It's the same goal that the DOJ is saying, is they're like, help keep your people out of trouble. We want an effective program. You got to figure out what that is. We're just setting a standard. And we know that effective programs train and communicate in a way that's more interesting and playful and positive. It doesn't have to be that long, boring annual training. No, there's no law. There's a couple policies, right? Like in certain states, harassment and discrimination have to be a certain amount of time, and there's some privacy stuff that has to be a certain amount of time. But for the most part, there's not a time limit. It's be effective, engage people. And so they're just saying, we want you to keep people out of trouble. So if we keep that as our beacon or our shining star, then that'll help you maybe reinvent what your program is. That was a good ending point, but I want to point out one other thing on this. I noticed on page 13 of the memo, it talked about making sure people have access to information and ease of access to information. And I feel that's an interesting to point out, because one of the things that we advocate for is more frequent communications to drive traffic to policies and resources so that it's more easily findable when the problems occur. So anyway, I want to just do a quick shout out to that. That was another thing that stuck out to me. In addition to making your training more effective, also we need to drive traffic to policies and resources and make them easy to find, make them written in human language. I'm working on a code of conduct for a company right now, and we're using characters to do little call outs of like tips and lessons about each particular policy. Like, there's lots of ways to make the information more easily accessible. And guess what? You can measure that, how many people access your policy and how has that changed over time. So anyway, I think that's another thing that's new in this document.
Ronnie, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Train and communicate colorfully.